Good evening, afternoon or morning, depending on when you are watching this. Welcome to the Relationship, Sex and Health Education Parent and Carer Information presentation. The Relationship, Sex and Health Education curriculum is extremely broad, including units on mental well-being, online safety, friendships, peer pressure, families and much, much more. However, this information event will be looking in detail at specific areas of our programme of study at Herne, namely puberty and relationships and sex education. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Mrs. Hepworth, and I've been at Herne for coming up to 11 years this September. I've taught 7 of those years in Year 6. I've also been the Personal, Social and Health Education Lead, and I might refer to Personal, Social and Health Education as PSHE throughout this presentation. I've been the lead for 9 years, and I've attended numerous PSHE courses in my time, planned many PSHE units, including the Relationships and Sex Education curriculum at Herne for the last 8 years, and I'm an extremely passionate advocate and champion for this subject. Mrs. Thacker is the other PSHE lead, although she's currently on maternity leave, and she's been at Herne for coming up to 10 years this September. She's taught all over the school, and she has an extremely good knowledge of the curriculum across the years. She's also been the PSHE lead at Herne for 7 years, attended numerous PSHE courses in her time, planned many PDL units, including the Growing and Changing Puberty unit, and is also an extremely passionate advocate and champion for this subject. So I think it's fair to say, without sounding like we're blowing our own trumpets, that between the two of us we are quite well versed in all things to do with the Relationship, Sex and Health Education programme offered at Herne, and we look forward to taking you through this information. We know that as parents and carers, you are first and foremost the most important teachers in your child's and children's lives, which is why we feel it's so important to share with you our graduated, age-appropriate programme of study and sensitive approach to teaching such important subjects. We welcome your feedback if you have any, and we have put our details at the end of the PowerPoint if you'd like to contact us about anything mentioned here. We appreciate there is a lot of information on the slides, so we encourage you to get yourself a drink, get comfy, and pause the video whenever you need. Department for Education's, DfE, Guidance on Relationships Education and Sex Education, RSE, and Health Education. The Relationships Education, Relationships and Sex Education and Health Education Regulations 2019, made under Sections 34 and 35 of the Children and Social Work Act 2017, make relationships education compulsory for all pupils receiving primary education, and relationships and sex education compulsory for all pupils receiving secondary education. They also make health education compulsory in all schools, except independent schools. To begin with, we're going to look at the statutory guidance from the Department for Education. And just to let you know, the Year 4 Growing and Changing Puberty unit will begin after half term, and Year 6's Puberty and Reproduction unit will begin the week commencing Monday the 15th of May. You will receive letters to notify you of when your child's class will begin this teaching and learning, and this will give you time to either talk to your child beforehand if you want to, and it will also explain why they might come home talking about menstruation or wet dreams. DfE Secretary of State forward. This is the opening of the DfE statutory guidance document. It explains their reasoning for why relationships and health education are now statutory in primary schools, and how their decision has been informed by a thorough engagement process, not to mention years of campaigning from organisations like the PSHE Association. They go on to say, please feel free to pause the video if you need to. This is taken directly from the DfE's statutory guidance on RSE and health education. The content set out in this guidance covers everything that primary schools should teach about relationships and health, including puberty. The National Curriculum for Science also includes subject content in related areas, such as the main external body parts, the human body as it grows from birth to old age, including puberty, and reproduction in some plants and animals. It will be for primary schools to determine whether they need to cover any additional content on sex education to meet the needs of their pupils. Many primary schools already choose to teach some aspects of sex education and will continue to do so, although it is not a requirement. As it states here, puberty forms part of the statutory health education curriculum. Puberty life cycles, including reproduction in some animals and plants, are also a part of the science curriculum. It is for schools to determine whether they teach sex education in more detail than what is covered in the science curriculum. It is important that the transition phase before moving to secondary school supports pupils' ongoing emotional and physical development effectively. The department continues to recommend, therefore, that all primary schools should have a sex education programme tailored to the age and the physical and emotional maturity of the pupils. It should ensure that both boys and girls are prepared for the changes that adolescence brings and, drawing on knowledge of the human life cycle set out in the National Curriculum for Science, how a baby is conceived and born. Which is why at Herne we choose to continue teaching our relationships and sex education programme in Year 6, when we feel the children are at an age when they are mature enough to learn about this subject in a safe and secure environment. We will go into more detail later about the pedagogy of our programme, what specifically is covered, some of the resources we use, and how we ensure we create a safe, comfortable climate for learning. Primary age pupils will often ask their teachers or other adults questions pertaining to sex and sexuality which go beyond what is set out in relationships education. At Herne, we understand some parents and carers may feel a little unsure about their child being taught about sexual intercourse and how a baby is conceived and born. However, there is so much evidence which supports sex education being taught in the later years of primary school in a safe and judgment-free environment. This transition period between Year 6 and 7 is a really important time to talk about this subject, when access to the internet and connections with older pupils at secondary school can sometimes lead to children finding out about sex, but through unreliable and inappropriate sources. Research shows it is far better that children learn about this subject in the safety of a classroom, where we can ensure children are accessing factual, age-appropriate information from a reliable source. So why is relationships and sex education and health education so important? Well, children are naturally curious about growing up, how their bodies work and how humans reproduce. Their questions need to be answered honestly, using language and explanations appropriate for their age and maturity, thus avoiding unnecessary mystery, confusion, embarrassment, and shame. Relationships and sex education address the questions and concerns raised by the biological facts. For example, exploring the feelings a new baby can bring, or the effect of puberty on friendships. It provides balance to sometimes distorted messages about sex and gender roles in the media, and helps protect children by explaining boundaries and safety, and developing the language and understanding needed to recognise abusive behaviour and seek help. It also helps pupils to develop respectful and consensual attitudes and behaviours. These are all incredibly important points for why children should learn about their growing and changing bodies and about how a baby is made and born. We all know children are naturally curious. Children want to have their questions answered in a safe environment where they can feel relaxed enough to ask questions and engage with these important biological facts of life. Often during RSE and health education lessons, we found children open up and feel safe enough to ask further questions on these subjects. Feel free to pause the video here and have a read through this slide. Right to withdraw from sex education, but not relationships or health education. As you are now aware, relationships and health education are statutory in primary schools. Therefore, children cannot be withdrawn from this part of the PSHE curriculum. However, sex education is not compulsory in primary schools. Therefore, parents and carers have the right to request that their child be withdrawn from the sex education element of our relationships and sex education programme of study. At Herne, we welcome a meeting with parents or carers who would like to withdraw their child from the sex education element of our relationships and sex education programme of study. A discussion with the head teacher and subject leader can be arranged. This will help us to ensure the wishes of the parents and carers are understood, but also to clarify the nature and purpose of the taught curriculum at Herne. It is important to us that you understand the benefits of receiving this important education and any detrimental effects that withdrawal might have on the child. This could include any social and emotional effects of being excluded, as well as the likelihood of the child hearing their peers' version of what was said in the classes, rather than what was directly said by the teacher in a safe, non-judgmental environment. The Department for Education continues to recommend, therefore, that all primary schools should have a sex education programme tailored to the age and the physical and emotional maturity of the pupils. It should ensure that both boys and girls are prepared for the changes that adolescence brings, and drawing on knowledge of the human life cycle set out in the National Curriculum for Science, how a baby is conceived and born. This link is just a link to our RSE and health education policy at Herne. Just to clarify, the sex education element will only be taught in Year 6. However, as you can appreciate, children are curious and questions about sexual intercourse do get asked in earlier years. We know this from experience. When this arises, teachers will answer their questions in an age-appropriate way adhering to the Herne Junior School RSE and health education policy. I am going to stop here, and there will be a second and third video where you can find out more about our pedagogy, resources, and how we create that safe climate for learning. Thank you for listening.